So, welcome to All This Math. This is Professor Parker, and tonight we're doing a video on a couple of questions that I call boat math. Boat math. Shout out to my dad, Dr. Brian Morrison. He's a sailor. Shout out to my man Larry Lewis. He's also a sailor. I had them in mind when I thought to do these problems that I had went over with another student at an earlier time. So, let's read the problems because they're both word problems. And we also have to understand that we can't do math if we can't read. So reading comprehension is key because we have to read the information and then we'll know what type of calculations we need to do. But we first need to read and comprehend and fully understand what we're actually doing. So, start with number one. We have two different questions, but let's start with number one. Number one says a boat crew has 20 gallons of water, right? There are 4 crew members, right, on this boat. If divided evenly, how many quarts of water will each crew member get? All right, so notice what switched up. The problem switched up on you. First, the problem starts talking about gallons. Then in the question, it talks about quarts. So this is a unit conversion problem. You have to know how to convert one thing to another, just like miles to feet, inches to feet, cups to pints. We have to know how to do these types of conversions, okay? So let's underline some key information. So the first piece of key information is that we're dealing with 20 gallons, all right? And then there are 4 crew members. Now that's key because of this part right here, if divided evenly, right? Because we want to be fair in terms of people getting the same amount of water. We want the water to be distributed equally and evenly. All right, equal distribution of water because everybody needs water, right? The question is how many quarts of water? So let's underline quarts of water will each crew member get if divided evenly. So it's a few ways we could do this. This can be set up as a proportion. So if I want to show you like the long, drawn out algebraic way, I want to show you that because that you can apply to any type of problem, okay? So I'm going to show you that. But first we need to think about conversions. We're dealing with gallons and quarts. Now what we want to think about is how many quarts are in a gallon. Now you might say how many gallons are in a quart, but gallons are larger than quarts. So, I mean, you could write that. I mean, mathematically it doesn't really make a difference, but let's try to be consistent with reality. And in reality, a quart is smaller than a gallon. And we know that there are 4 quarts in 1 gallon. So I want to write a fraction that represents that. And again, we shouldn't be scared of fractions. Fractions are our friends. We need them. So let's say 4 quarts in 1 gallon. All right. Now we're setting up a proportion. And a proportion is one fraction set equal to another fraction. Okay. So we have 4 quarts in 1 gallon. Excuse the handwriting. All right. Now, we are trying to find out what? How many quarts will each crew member get? All right. But actually, you know what? I think what I want to do is, before I even do this, I want to do the division part first, right? Because we know that there are 20 gallons of water, and we know that there are 4 people or 4 crew members. We should be thinking about how much each person will get. So if I'm going to divide 20 among 4 people evenly, I'm basically just doing this. 20 divided by 4, which is going to be 5. So that's 5 gallons. So each person is going to get 5 gallons of water. All right? So now I take that information and then I come here to the proportion. If 4 quarts are in 1 gallon, the question is how many quarts are in 5 gallons? And notice how I line this up. Across the top, my numerators, I got quarts and quarts. And my denominator, I got gallons and gallons. Quarts and quarts, gallons and gallons. But this is one way that is efficient and that does in fact work. Okay? So now, we can do some cross multiplication. If we're doing this the algebraic way, multiply this times this, and then multiply this times this. So I'm talking about 1 gallon times X quarts. I'm not really worried about the units. I'm not going to worry about that right now, okay? Because I'm just trying to come up with a number. So 1 times X is going to give me X. And then I'm going to write my equal sign. This equal sign right here comes down. And then 4 times 5 gives me 20. Right? So that tells me that there are 20 quarts in 5 gallons. Now, another way to look at this would have been this. If I know that 1 gallon times a certain number gives me 5 gallons, that's like something that might be called a scale factor. All I would have to do is multiply that same number by the number of quarts I had in the numerator. So if 1 times 5 equals 5 gallons, then all I have to do is, in order to maintain consistency, is multiply the 4 quarts by 5 to get the 20 quarts. That's another way to do this problem, right? Now that's if I wrote it out. Now a lot of people do this like intuitively. They'll do the math in their head, and that's cool. You should be able to do that. But when you do the math in your head, you're really just doing this, right? Even if you don't realize it. So a lot of us kind of have like some intimidation of algebra, but we don't realize that we're actually using algebra all the time anyway, right? So don't let the algebra intimidate you, especially when you use it all the time anyway and don't even realize it, right? So another way we could have did it was, let's say I converted to the total number of quarts from the beginning. Let's just say I did like, okay, 20 gallons. I know it's 4 quarts in 1 gallon. So I might ask the question, how many quarts are in 20 gallons? So I would just say in my head, I would do 20 times 4, which gives me 80. So that's 80 quarts. So this amount of water is also known as 80 quarts, right? If it's broken down into quarts, I go from gallons to quarts, so I got 80 quarts. And then the question is, okay, well, if it's 4 crew members, I just divide by 4, and it's divided evenly. That's key, right? So I do the 80 divided by 4, which gives me 20. So that means each person should get 20 quarts, which is what we already found out from doing it algebraically on the board. All right? Again, hashtag boat math. All right? So now, let's go to number 2. Let me erase all this and do some more boat math. All right, so let's read number 2. It says a boat crew has 5 rolls of rope. Each roll is 90 feet long. How many yards of rope does the crew have? Yeah, I'm just erase my word does. This is the word does. Does the crew have? So again, they're taking us on a loop again because they start out talking about feet, but they end up talking about yards. So we're going from feet to yards, right? Feet to yards. So we have to know how to make the conversion. All right. Now, first thing we should know is that how many feet are in a yard? You might say how many yards are in a foot, but technically feet are smaller than yards. So really, and realistically speaking, we're talking about feet are in yards. So we need to know this. This is information that you need to know. Just like we needed to know that there were 4 quarts in 1 gallon, in number 1. And number 2, we need to know that there are 3 feet in 1 yard. Okay, so 3 feet is in 1 yard. So now we go back to the problem. It says a boat crew has 5 rolls of rope. Each roll is 90 feet long. How many yards of rope does the crew have altogether? So the word altogether is not in there, but that's implied. We're talking about the total amount of rope that they have. So one way to do this is to look at it like, okay, well, 3 feet in 1 yard, I can set up a fraction. 3 feet in 1 yard. Now, this fraction is going to be equal to another fraction, which creates my proportion. All right, I need my proportion set up. So each roll is 90 feet, but I got 5 rolls. So altogether, I'm doing 90 feet times 5. I got 450 feet of rope. I got 450 feet of rope, but I want to know how many yards that is. So what I'm doing is I'm saying, okay, well, feet are on top, yards are on the bottom. So in my next fraction, feet will be on top, yards will be on the bottom. I know that I'm dealing with 450 feet. And my question is, how many yards is that? Right? How many yards is that? So one way to look at this is I could do the cross multiplication. 3 times x is 3x. 1 times 450 is 450. Then I divide by 3 on both sides to isolate the x. That's the hardcore, traditional, technical algebra approach to this. Divide by 3, divide by 3. I get x equals 150. So that's 150 yards. Or I could also look at it like this. 3 feet times what will give me 450 feet? What number? What number do I multiply 3 by to get 450? Or I could look at it as a division problem. 450 divided by 3 gives me what number? 150, right? So if I draw an arrow and just write a 150 right here, and this is like what we would be doing like in terms of mental math, right? So 3 times 150 gives me 450. All I got to do is I got to multiply 150 the same way on the bottom among the denominators. So 1 times 150 should give me my answer. And it does. 150 yards. All right? So that means that the crew has 150 yards of rope. All right? But once again, a little bit of boat math. All right? Thanks for tuning in. Hope you learned something. And please continue to send your questions to the All This Math DM. And we'll see you soon. Peace.